soil regeneration tonight, but I want to talk about a little bit something deeper, and our amazing speakers are going to cover soil regeneration here in a little bit. So I created this talk series for my HOA up north of Durango, and the goal is really to gather community around transitioning away from toxic chemicals and moving towards healing our landscapes, which sequesters carbon and helps hold water in the soil. We can do so much by just healing our soils. So, it's interesting. My HOA is invited, but few, and apparently none tonight, come, and I don't know why that is. I think one reason is half of our ownership, or more than half, don't actually live there, so it's hard to care about a place when you don't actually live in that place. But it's kind of transitioning that mindset so that more of us are starting to realize that whatever's happening in these local areas, whether you live there or not, it really matters on a big scale for our entire global community and climate. So the deeper roots of what is really going on in this planet is what I want to talk a little bit about. We are the most connected humans via tech and travel ever to exist, and yet we are the most disconnected and the most lonely in the history of humans. And I think that's just fascinating and extremely sad. We're disconnected from each other, we're disconnected from nature, we're disconnected from our food source. We've even managed to disconnect nature from herself, which is part of why we're breaking ecosystems. We're seeing these massive storms and wildfires and things that nobody can really wrap their heads around. And it's all because we have this extractive industrial way of thinking, and that's how we're treating the world. So really it all starts with how we think, and then collectively how we operate together to solve these things in a more holistic context. So as an example, everybody who's in here, raise your hand if you could live without a grocery store. Can anybody? I can't either. I mean, I'd love to have a community garden, but I have to get them to stop spraying chemicals first. But yeah, no one even really knows where their food comes from. It's pretty rare. Most cities, actually all cities, are 3 days from anarchy. If there was any earthquake that broke, the major transportation routes or whatever, they'd be out of food in 3 days. So 9 meals from anarchy, people would be killing each other. This is how fragile our global and national food system is, but no one thinks about it because we just buy it. Money is a replacement for relationship, and so we don't even think about these things, but we are incredibly vulnerable to so many problems. And so, we've created our own hell, honestly, but the good news in that, even though it doesn't seem like it, is that since these are human-created systems, these are also systems that we can dismantle and start to transition to healthy, localized, decentralized food systems and economies within more of this community-based aspect instead of these global situations where we don't know each other or where anything comes from. And so let's transition to something regenerative and healthy. And I'm grateful to be part of a new startup that is working on real root cause solutions to this stuff. If you want to go to getrealfood.com, you can sign up on our email. It's just a splash page right now, but you can stay in the loop on what we're doing and when we launch. And I want to read from this new book that I'm really loving. I'm only on page 4, but it's awesome. It's called The Last Hours of Ancient Sunlight by Tom Hartman, The Fate of the World and What We Can Do Before It's Too Late. And a couple of things in the intro I really liked. Our problems arise out of our culture, our view of the world. The reason most solutions offered to the world's crises are impractical is because they arise from the same worldview that caused the problem. When enough people change the way they view things, solutions become evident, often in ways we couldn't even imagine. We have destroyed much of the world because of our culture. We can save much of it by changing our culture. And Table to Farm Compost is part of that new way of viewing things, a new way of doing things, and it's super exciting. And quickly, I just want to go over our awesome regenerative sponsors. So everyone on here is either doing regenerative things or promoting regeneration. So we have James Ranch Grill. They have a regenerative market and garden and beef and restaurant, and all this amazingness that's helping to reverse climate change while being healthy, nutrient-dense food. We can get away from plastic and have local, healthy, refillable stuff like soaps and things. Lisa Bison, she has 900 acres in Hesperus, Colorado, where she ranches bison regeneratively. She's got about 85 right now. During Outdoor Exchange, awesome place to get used gear. I love going there. We have all of our awesome speakers. You're going to get to your Table of Farm Compost tonight. And then we have some additional sponsors down here. We have Lemaire Family Fund. We have Elizabeth Kenahan Paintings. And Andrew Yates Still Pictures Moving. They're doing our videography tonight. So also after the talk, we're going to Lola's on 2nd if anybody wants to join. And then I have a couple of bios to go over for our awesome speakers. So I love their about. It says the average person throws away 20 pounds of food each month. When you become part of a Table to Farm Compost, you can reduce that waste entirely. We take your food scraps and turn them into a living soil that sequesters carbon from the atmosphere down into the ground, supporting plant health and microscopic life that keeps the soil food web alive and healthy. We envision life on planet Earth where healthy living soils support a diversity of plants, animals, and people. Climate change is one of the most urgent and potentially devastating issues of our time. Its effect on our planet's people and biodiversity is unparalleled because we still have the opportunity to reverse its impact. Table to Farm Compost is meeting this challenge head-on with its full-cycle business model of diverting waste and recycling it into soil amendments. Climate change is disproportionately impacting those who are socioeconomically disadvantaged and is costing our planet trillions of dollars in disaster mitigation. Here in the Southwest, the impact is heightened with unprecedented drought and wildfires impacting people, the planet, and the economy. And tonight we have Taylor Hansen, who is a managing member. Taylor received his BS in finance with a minor in atmospheric and oceanic sciences from the University of Colorado. He also studied courses in the renewable and sustainable energy program. After college, Taylor went on to work in the mortgage banking sector in Florida. He returned to his hometown of Durango in 2014 to co-manage his childhood family business, a Honda automobile franchise. During this time, he attended a master's light automotive program in a DA academy in Washington, D.C., focused on financial and personal management of the automotive dealership's different departments. Taylor cares deeply about local sustainability, closed-loop ecosystems, and the natural environment. He likes to mountain bike, ski, hunt, play tennis, and practice Aikido. Is that right? Aikido. He is also an EMT and ski patroller at Purgatory Mountain. I like helping folks, playing in the dirt, compost reference, photographing nature, and being a part of meaningful community work. And then we also have Chris Kalaz. Say your last name correctly? Chulas. No?
Yeah. When I got married, I combined it.
Oh, that's awesome. I love it. Chris Chulas?
Chulas, yeah.
Chula, okay. Operations manager. Chris is a recent transplant to Durango, but has been working in the outdoor education/guiding field in the Rocky Mountain West for the past 7 years. He graduated from the University of Vermont with a BS in environmental science with a concentration in sustainability science. His interest in compost started long ago in 2011 when he took his permaculture design certification course. While his focus over the years has been on guiding, there has always been a passion for sustainability. He has experimented with vermicomposting, grown oyster mushrooms in the basement, been an avid dumpster diver, and really enjoys repurposing trash and forgotten things into new, useful stuff. You and my husband should talk. His role as operations manager keeps him busy with equipment maintenance, designing new systems to build efficiency, and making sure the to-do list gets done. So welcome, Chris and Taylor.
Thanks. Thank you.
You guys are the host at home, everybody. Is it, are any of y'all customers, or is it home composting? Cool.
Customers of, what'd you say?
I was wondering if any of you guys are customers of Table to Farm.
Oh,
No. Yeah, just kind of, but you home compost?
I do like, compost.
Yeah.
Yeah, been doing it for years.
And then are you composting at all?
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
Very small scale, but
Very
yes.
small.
Well,
Yes.
Okay, well, it's always interesting to kind of get a sense for people's familiarity with composting. I thought Mandy did. Thanks for the intro and for inviting us as speakers, so we really appreciate it. And we'll just start kind of going through our slide deck here. Our mission is to recycle food waste into compost and to save the earth. I think that's a snapshot of our mission. It's kind of bold and cliche, but we try to impact change here locally for our local community through composting. And we all really believe in what we're doing. We have a circular economy and business model. And this is a picture of Chris and I's colleague, Monique, my business partner. This is actually out at our old farm. So we've since moved from this site, and those are all rows of compost. Chris could probably probably speak to the constitution of them.
Yeah, so like they were saying, this was at our old site. We recently moved into a larger site about 6 months ago. And to put it in perspective, when I started 3.5 years ago, we had one windrow.
Wow.
Yeah, half the size of one of those. And that was it. And it took 20 minutes to deal with and manage, and I was like, okay, cool. I was doing kind of everything, driving around, picking up compost, managing the stuff at the site, and it was a pretty reasonable workload. And this is roughly 2 years later, and we've increased our inputs through just our customer base, as well as restaurants and grocery stores in Durango, as well as Ska Brewery. So Ska used to send all their spent brewers grain to cattle as cattle feed, and they wanted to, both the owners are vegetarians. They wanted to like stick to their guns and compost instead of feeding cattle, and so they started bringing their spent grain to us to experiment with composting. And at this point, we now take all of their spent grain. When we first started, it was the occasional dump truck or dump trailer of compost that we took to figure out how to compost it best, because it's a kind of a unique product. It's very moist and just it's different than just dealing with food. So yeah, so that's where we sort of upped our volume and started creating a lot more compost, is using that Ska, as well as the increase in our customer base.
So we're out right now at the same farm, and this is Savannah Tree Farm. So it's a private landowner east of Durango off of 160. And we just recently, in the adjacent corner of the field, got done building a Class 3 composting facility. So the Class 3, we're the 16th in the state, and we're the first one that's been built in the last 5 or 6 years. It's a pain in the butt. I think the article in the paper alluded to this. It's very challenging to get permitted. But the neat thing about the facility is it'll accommodate our whole region's organic waste stream. So that's the hope, right, is to really divert as much organic material as possible. And now we have the facility kind of set up to be able to do that. Also, one thing that's kind of neat to note in these piles is we just got done doing a market disintegration study. So we were looking at compostable products, trying to figure out what breaks down, what doesn't break down. And we found that some products broke down fine. Some, I think the majority did not perhaps break down as well as we had anticipated. But we have never really collected compostable products, and the end result is like really low contamination. Up on the Front Range, A1 Organics is the largest organics yard in the state. If they were a landfill, they'd be, I think it's the 7th largest landfill in the country. It's about an 80-acre site, and they go through, just to kind of give you an idea of scale, they go through about 470,000 tons of organic waste a year. So like for perspective, our 5-county region down here, in 2015 waste audit, said that the total municipal solid waste for the region is about 105,000 tons of trash. So of that 105,000, figure a smaller percentage, 20 to 40% is organics. So just kind of gives you a scale for the Front Range operation. But they have recently not changed their policy to not take compostable products any longer because of the contamination, you get microplastics. And so we've taken this whole approach to like building this relationship with the green bucket. It's kind of like a sociology, psychology type approach to educating folks, and we also, in not collecting products, don't have the contamination that some other facilities have to deal with, and it's tough once you allow them to go back. So we're trying to limit, it's a whole other kind of beast. But
I just touch base on the circular economy component again, because I think that's one of the coolest things about our company is when you throw away your trash, that goes to the Bonded landfill, it goes away, you never see it. When you bring your recycling to that supposedly goes somewhere to be recycled into something. But as we know, the more and more research is coming out, most things don't actually get recycled. And I think it's 95% of plastics aren't recycled.
Yeah.
We have a challenge with glass just in our county being, it's both a perk of living in a rural area and also a downside. It's like we can't deal with our glass problem very easily. All of our glass has to get trucked to the front range to get managed. So, whereas we are like 9 miles away from here as the crow flies. And so all of our inputs come from the city of Durango and go 9 miles away, get turned into soil, and they get brought back to the city of Durango, or maybe it'll get brought to Mancos for some farms, or the Animas River Valley, or some Bayfield farms. But we stay really local versus like your stuff doesn't go away. It goes over there on County Road 236 and then gets brought back here. So I think that's one of the like cool, unique parts about composting is that recycling is something we've been told for all of our lives is like a good thing to do, but no one knows where things are getting recycled, how things are getting recycled, and what's actually going on with that versus this is a much simpler, like we take your food waste, we put it in a pile, we manage it, and then we turn it into soil. So that's simple. And some examples of the compost that we make here. I brought some, 2 different types of compost right now. One that's finished that we can look at and like smell and feel, and then one that's kind of just started and we'll be able to tell the difference. Yeah.
Do you have different mixtures for different types of compost, or is it all the same?
When we first started, based on some of the different inputs I was getting, I was trying to have separate piles. So if we go back to like this one, those far piles were the beer mash piles, just because we weren't really quite sure how it was going to turn out, so we wanted to have something separate.
Yeah.
And then these closer ones that are a little bit darker, those are the food waste piles. And we found that it was generally like a color mix. That was the main difference. Like it looked darker, and some of our food waste compost was finer when it was screened down. It had like a finer grain size to it, versus the beer mash stuff was a little bit bigger. And we didn't necessarily screen it as much either because there was no food in it. Like grain, tiny little grains, and then it was mixed in with our wood shavings and our wood chips. So we didn't think there was nothing to get screened out. Like when we're screening our food waste compost, so avocado pits will come out. They'll come out and then you'll squeeze them and they'll break into nothing. But they don't unless they're hit with something, they don't break down themselves. They do almost disintegrate in your hands, but you have to physically squeeze them. And we find all sorts of random stuff, like knives and forks. And, I have half my cutlery is from the farm. It's kind of ridiculous. I'm actually thinking about starting a little shelf of things, rubber duckies, plastic triceratops.
Oh my God.
Like little alien man. I've had all sorts of random stuff. I know, I really should. So that's kind of the main difference is there's just different size products that end up in the after product. We now screen everything, and where we are now at the new site, it wasn't worth the logistical challenge of separating everything when it comes in. So now we just have piles where everything goes in. It's the food, it's the beer mash, it's the wood chips, it's the sawdust, it's everything. So yeah, it'll still all get screened, but for the sake of the site and maximizing our space, because we just plan on expanding so much. Here, you can't quite tell, but essentially on the left-hand side, that's the wall, that's the fence. So I ran out of room. There was no more room left to put windrows in. And this was only 400 yards, and our new site is 18,000 yards. So yeah, it's magnitudes bigger, and I'll just maximize efficiency as much as possible.
Yeah, so those are some of our products that Chris alluded to. We're not only a hauler, we're obviously a compost producer, and we try to create end markets for our products. So, examples of end markets are just where we sell our compost or compost products. Larger end markets in the state of Colorado are through CDOT, Colorado Department of Transportation, or Horizon Environmental, a local firm that I'm sure you guys are all familiar with. Horizon Environmental does like restoration projects on the side of the road, and they will use compost even when they do mine reclamation projects. So as we get kind of larger, the hope is to kind of get into that market with Colorado Department of Transportation. And then obviously agricultural markets are a big deal. Agricultural markets, that's how we get the compost back out into the land, and you create that kind of full cycle.
Yeah, we're going to touch base on some of the impacts of compost. It's also worth noting there is we use coffee sacks for a lot of our deliveries for our customers. They get dividends every year, and so we really try to avoid the use of plastic. It's a challenging logistical problem because in one way, that's selling bagged compost is where you see it for the most part, almost all compost. If you're not going to buy it by the dump truckload or by the pickup truckload or whatever, you're going to buy 20 bags of compost. I see it all the time. I see it at Ace, see it at Home Depot. And so we really wanted to get away from that. So we repurposed burlap sacks from Drink Coffee Company, and those are both what we deliver our wood shavings in to customers to hold on to that, to adding to their own bucket, as well as delivering the dividends out to folks and anyone that's ordering small amounts of compost. And then we can take the burlap back and use it again. And once it's no longer good, we just compost it.
Oh, cool.
You guys do. So, because we do our composting through you,
Yeah.
and so I requested 2 bags of the compost, and one of the sacks has Sao Paulo, Brazil on there, and I live in Sao Paulo. So I'm like, I want to keep this sack. I mean, it was just wild. It's
Totally.
like,
It's super cool. It's something I think really, the artwork on that is usually really rad.
Well, you can keep the sack.
I honestly don't know what I would do with it. I mean, I thought, oh, maybe I could hang it up or something, but it was just really cool.
And then for bigger orders, we reuse the super sacks as 1 yard sacks, and so same deal. We can fill them, and then folks can bring them back when they're done. And then a lot of folks, when they're getting more than that, it'll be a dump truck or a dump trailer.
And we found recently some sustainably sourced bags. Chris found that'll be better products. But even if you're buying plastic bags, not encouraging plastic, but the Kroger stores in town, I'm sure you all bring your bags there. We're just starting up to divert their waste. It's been this 3-year-long kind of pain in the butt to kind of get them on board. But we're excited to be diverting the North City Market Store and then the store in Pagosa. I'm not sure what they're going to do with the South City Market Store, but it's non-disclosure stuff. We're not really sure.
What did you say
Yeah.
you were doing? I didn't catch the
Yeah,
first part.
diverting the city markets food waste.
Oh, they're food. Oh,
Yeah, everything from the salad bar and the fruit, all the.
what were they doing? Just throwing it away before?
Yeah. Albertsons has been composting with us for.
Since November 2019.
Yeah.
So a
Yeah,
long
that's-
time.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and it's a lot. It's between a ton to 2 tons, probably a week.
Oh my God.
Yep,
Yeah.
per store.
In the summers,
So it's a tremendous amount.
4 64-gallon totes twice a week.
And then they just contribute it to you because you got rid of it for them.
It's a service. It's the same service. So they pay us to pick it up, and we come pick it up from them.
Oh,
Yeah, same as our residential customers. It's a.
so they pay you to pick it up and then you can, that's good.
Just like you pay your trash company to pick up your trash. It's the same idea.
You know what? That brings up a good point. It's interesting. I don't want to get too far off track, but we've noticed that's important because it's almost like kind of Mandy was saying in the intro, it's a paradigm shift to the way people think, because when we get trash, we have this association with trash and the landfill, and we have to, pay for the service. And it's kind of there's that hesitation because folks are like, well, you make it into a product, which is it's a valid point. So oftentimes we have to we kind of counter that and we're like, well, you have to pay to pick up your trash, right? And then you have to process it and kind of do all the things. But I think it just speaks to this larger thing about social change, and that takes time, right? If you look at the recycling movement, it came out of the 70s and the kind of some of the trash. Federal trash, don't litter, right? And that had had repercussions and led into this kind of recycling space, or not throwing trash on the side of the road. So it was this social, cultural conditioning, and really we're recycling organics, and we'll kind of get into this, but I think people fail to realize the value of recycling organics. Like, and I think this later in the presentation, but if food waste, what is the quote? This project drawdown looked at food waste, and food waste is, in terms of things that humans can do, it's the number one most impactful thing, reducing food waste that humans can do to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. So it's pretty staggering.
Yeah.
It is that information should get out. I mean, just be
exactly. Yeah, it should.
Yeah. And that's one of the things, I mean, I think that's one of the biggest things that drew me to this, is that I can't buy an electric car, I can't put solar panels on my roof, but I can compost my food waste. And right, everyone wants to be able to do something. You were talking about it, Mandy. It's like no one ever feels like there's something that you can do very easily. And that's 100% what drew me to this company and to composting in general. So this is a physical thing. I can see the end product. I know what's happening, and it's not that hard. It takes a little bit of behavioral change, but if you start, I started composting in college. Definitely didn't do it in high school, growing up. That was not a thing. I knew that we had a pile of leaf clippings or something, but that was it. Definitely no food. And so, yeah, I think it's one of those simple things that anyone can do, and we want to make it accessible for everyone and just standardize it. Just as recycling became standardized, and now recycling maybe slightly is getting phased out because it's not necessarily true. But whenever we stop burying trash in the ground, so we can start diverting some of it into soil.
That's vastly impactful.
Yeah, and right, food waste in the country is just massive as well. It's my biggest pet peeve is I go home to visit my parents very rarely, but I open their fridge and they still buy, they have 3 kids in the house, and I'm just half of this food is moldy. It's all bad. Why I have to go through and clean out their fridge, and that's one of the first steps we can do, right? Even before you compost, is just how you grocery shop, or just don't buy everything in a massive bag of something you're never going to finish. Or think about how you can freeze things before they go bad. Or there's so many ways that we can limit our impact well before the part when we start throwing stuff in the trash or the compost bin. And again, it's a behavioral change. I see it happening at least among some of my friends. But granted, my friends are all probably interested in the same thing as me. Right? We're all in an echo chamber here in Durango. But yeah, we want to, anything that does end up getting, thrown away, we want to make sure it gets thrown away to a compost pile.
So I was going to say, if they buy too much, it's their problem.
I know.
And they can then...
You almost feel better about tossing. I'm composting it.
I'm going to read a note here that's in the notes. The slide, it says, getting food from the farm to our fork eats up 10% of the total U.S. energy budget, uses 50% of U.S. land, and swallows 80% of all fresh water consumed in the United States. Yet, 40% of food in the United States today goes uneaten. This not only means that Americans are throwing out the equivalent of $165 billion each year, but also that the uneaten food ends up rotting in landfills as the single largest component of U.S. municipal solid waste, where it accounts for a large portion of U.S. methane emissions. So I think, the more we can speak to this broad impact, the more we can empower and educate folks that, like Chris was saying, really, one green bucket, or however you're going to compost, right? We're not saying everyone in Durango should compost from table to farm, although we like that, but I think, if you're going to compost at home in your backyard, or if you bring it to a friend's house that has a farm, right? Or you recycle it with us at our facility, it makes a really big difference. And I think people just don't quite know how big a difference it makes.
Well, is there anybody trying to get the word out by speaking? Well, you're speaking here.
The Durango Herald has put this most recent article was quite front page, but they've had several news articles about both us opening the facility and along the way, like kind of how this process has grown from 6 years ago, 7 years ago when it started.
Isn't the city of Durango looking at doing that with you?
Yeah, so we have a public-private partnership with the city of Durango. It's for kind of marketing, education, and outreach. But we're certainly looking into like how to expand. And I don't think we want, like, as an organization, we don't want to make it mandatory, because it's dangerous to make things mandatory. People say, no, we don't want to do that. And it's totally understandable. But we would love to see something like a landfill ban on organics, where you can't bring your organics to the landfill. And then how you choose to dispose of them is up to you. You could compost with us, you can take it to a friend's farm, or you can have backyard composting. And there's pros and cons to all of it, right? The economic piece, the wildlife piece. We mitigate wildlife encounters at our facility because we have a bear-proof fence around our new spot. So I think, and another kind of cool big picture thing is like California as a state is transitioning to, organics landfill ban. And it's House Bill 1383 or 1333 or something. But it's 75%-ish have to be in the next 3 or 4 years. And it's tiering up, and they're building up the infrastructure. In Colorado, Monique, Kirsten and I's colleague Monique, my business partner, she's the chair of the Colorado Compost Council. So it's her, and then a couple other folks, mostly from the Front Range. But in Colorado, we actually have a really progressive think tank of recycling folks. We just passed the most robust recycling laws in the country, in fact, that are going to take place in the next couple of years. It's called Extended Producer Responsibility. So it's really awesome. And I think that group of really educated folks, the next step is to really work on organics. And we just did this market survey study in Durango, which Mandy was a part of. And but we have all this really cool data, and we're starting to disseminate the data. And we were talking with Marty, the sustainability coordinator for the city this morning, about having a statistician look at the data and look at statistically significant stuff, so we can then take that out to the broader industry. And there's not a lot of that, but we're really trying to piece apart, like what people are willing to pay. Attitudes and behaviors around composting. Is it easy to build a habit? Do you think it smells? Does it really smell? The socioeconomic pieces. So just trying to look at all that and share it with our peers, because it takes a village.
So this shows a little bit about where the food ends up getting wasted. Fair amount is post-consumer, right? It's after it actually gets to your house and into your refrigerator. But more than half of it is related to the farms, the grocery store, and the restaurants. The restaurants are a big one that we've been trying to work on because it's more of a challenge to change that behavior. It's really easy to scrape your plate into into the trash, and there's other things that end up in there. And for us, we don't want the plastic straws and the knives and the napkins and the wax paper and all that jazz. So there's a handful of restaurants in town that have been working with us and training their staff, and it's been going really well so far. So I think it's really something that can grow. Yeah.
But you can't use meat products.
We can. Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. So that's one of the bigger things. The difference between backyard composting and commercial composting.
Oh, you can do it, but yeah.
Yeah. Our piles are hot. They're 140 degrees. Yeah. So they're breaking down. These are the same piles that people would do to manage animal mortalities. You could put whole hog, when they were doing a lot of killing of animals, they had to butcher a bunch of hogs during the pandemic, millions, because stuff wasn't getting out to restaurants, everything was closed. And so a lot of those ended up getting composted because they weren't going to get to people's plates fast enough. Yeah. These are the massive slaughterhouses, right? The ugly, nasty part that no one wants to think about. That's up in the northeast part of the state. But these could be used to deal with roadkill or animal mortality. We don't do that. but that's like the scale of these piles and what they could do with the heat and the microbes.
Really?
Break it all down.
But also to Chris's point, they will kill disease and pathogens from those animals as well. So we had I don't even remember who we had talked to, but it was a scientist of some sort. But they were talking about how, well, our piles get to, like Chris said, 131 degrees. At the process to further reduce pathogens, which is the process that we compost. It's thermophilic composting. You have to get to 131 degrees for 15 days, and in that period of time, you have to flip the piles 5 times. And that kills E. coli, salmonella, all kinds of other bad actors.
But it keeps.
So even like, I was just curious about, GMO seed or just, because the food waste that's going in there could be GMO too, genetically.
Yeah, we can't say that like only organic food comes to us,
Yeah.
but the process will kill any seeds, right? Like nothing can really, like at one point in the lifespan of the compost pile, like nothing can really grow in it. There's microbes and bacteria, but nothing can, like plants can't grow in it because it's too hot. And so once it goes beyond the thermophilic and then into the mesophilic stage where it starts like cooling down a little bit, then you start seeing, that's when we get it tested later on when it's curing and it loses a lot of that heat. And then we tested for seedling emergence and like the seedling vigor.
Okay, yeah.
But yeah, if I did that, like one of those buckets, if I did it right now, like nothing would probably be growing. No plants would probably growing right now. It'd be way too hot. Yeah.
Interesting.
So I think to answer the question, I think GMO stuff is kind of mitigated because it takes this complex organic organism and it breaks it down into this simple compound and kind of kills everything, and then the bacteria, the fungi, and the nematodes flourish. And so I think that's a good question because I feel like that comes up often. It's like, well, is it organic? And it's like so it's not, maybe it's not quite as applicable to composting in the same sense, but all of our stuff, we're the only STA certified compost facility in the southwest part of the state. I think the next closest facility is in Colorado Springs.
What's ST?
Seed Testing Assurance is the third-party tester for compost facilities in the country.
So it's organic for compost, right? That's the equivalent. So,
but even I was just talking with there's someone Allie Kellogg in Bayfield who manages the organic farm certifications for the area farms, and based on the way we've been talking for the past 2 weeks and her understanding, like our compost is applicable in organic farms. Right? So like you can't get the ONRI certification on compost because it's not like a food product.
Right.
But you can get the highest thing you can get is this STA certification, and then basically the only other thing we can do is like we tell them like this is our carbon to nitrogen ratio at the start of the process. It follows the PFRP, 131 degrees, X number of days, X number of flips, and we don't take any like compostable packaging, which we don't. Stuff gets in there, but we don't like accept it.
Yeah.
What is it, compost?
Compostable packaging.
Oh, pack out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We don't accept it. Sometimes stuff gets in there, but we pull it out. But we're not like open to anyone's compostable packaging because it's still a thing that we're figuring out, and most facilities are just saying no.
I mean, what do we do with that? I'm so confused about it because I love it when I can go to a place and that's like the lively daikon. I mean, it's awesome.
Yeah.
But then I have to put it at home. I don't know what to do with it. I kind of try and clean those out and I put them in the recycling thing.
Yeah. I mean, they'll
But I
break
don't
down faster.
know. Like, I mean, do you just stick that stuff in the garden, in the landfill then? And
I think you use it as many times as you can, right? Like reuse is the first. I mean, refuse is the first thing we can do, right? Refusing any of that stuff, and then reusing it as many times as possible.
Well, no, I'm just talking about like the compostable stuff.
Yeah, like the stuff that looks like plastic but compostable.
Yeah, that, or even but there's even the stuff that's not plastic.
It looks like cardboard.
It looks
Paper.
like
Oh,
cardboard.
yeah.
Like that, even that stuff. Well, where do I put that?
Unfortunately, your guess is as good. But maybe if it's a try to recycle it. If Chris's point is if it gets to the landfill, it's going to break down faster. And we just did this, and that's part of the problem. You're speaking to the problem because a lot of compostable packaging is like tail end kind of greenwashing, right? So it's like people are getting into it because it's a feel good thing, but if those products aren't actually making it to a compost facility, you have to weigh the pros and cons at that point. Well, then does it make sense for them to be recyclable products, or is it better just to refuse or reuse the stuff? So I would say maybe try to recycle it. If it ends up in a landfill, it's going to break down faster. So, maybe that's encouraging, but from a composting perspective, we kind of, for us, would open Pandora's box in terms of it's a bulking agent. So it adds volume, but it's not actually adding any organic or nutrient content to the pile. So it's just it's kind of this balance, right? And then it's like, all right, from a capitalist perspective, does it make sense? Can we make it work? And then just strictly from like a management perspective. And if you look at the state kind of globally, like A1 Organics, we're fortunate here because we can kind of dictate the stream. So right now we take palm plates break down. And we just did this big disintegration study. So maybe we open it up to a couple more products. And then we want to work with local vendors to make sure they buy those products only if they're going to buy compostable stuff. So I think that's the goal, is kind of this closed loop, work with local restaurants and make sure we're all buying. And then if you buy in bulk, you can maybe get a discount because you're all buying from the same manufacturer, and that manufacturer has products that break down. So I think we can figure it out locally, and I think a lot of this just comes back to like local solutions to large.
Isn't it kind of like industrial composting facilities too, like high heat?
I mean, we are the same spec as an industrial composting facility. Like they say that, like where industrial facilities exist, and that's the level that we are at now.
So it's not
like in your backyard compost.
Right. Okay.
And unless you're really taking temperatures, like you don't know how hot it's getting.
Yeah.
So,
right.
I think the main thing you could pull from it is that it's one less petroleum product.
Yeah.
Like even if it is going to end up in a landfill, like at least it didn't take oil to make it. It was made from plants, and that component of it is regenerative. Like, that's a plant. The plant can grow back. There's only X number of oil in the ground. But yeah, most facilities are avoiding it now more and more because it, like little things end up in the piles even after you screen it out, and it just doesn't look like, oh, there's plastic in there. Like even now we get stickers. Stickers are like our biggest bane. I'm like, oh, the stickers tell you that it's compost. But like, I'm sure you don't really want the stickers in your garden. The stickers out. I can't follow the stickers.
You mean like
out.
stickers on the produce?
On the bananas and apples, that's one easy thing. Like, why don't they just make vegetable dye or whatever?
And then just obviously, this kind of speaks for itself, but landfills are the largest source of anthropogenic methane emissions in the U.S. Methane, as I'm sure everyone knows, is 72 times as potent of a greenhouse gas over a 20-year period of time as carbon dioxide. It's a bad actor. So this is the project drawdown that I kind of alluded to earlier. And if we go back a couple slides, food waste for our country, it would be the third largest greenhouse gas emitter behind the U.S. and China, according to the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization. So you can see there's that kind of reflected reduced food waste can make a tremendous impact.
So living soil, like the regenerative component of compost, right? It's like if you go outside and look at the average soil in Southwest Colorado, it's probably like clay with a little bit of some grass growing in it. It's not a very great soil out here. They've been degraded over time, over the years of intensive tilling, as well as just the nature of our soil out here is clay heavy, right? Like go to the northeast, it's going to be more loamy, and you go to the northwest, same deal. They have more organic matter in their soils, and so there's not a lot of stuff alive in our clay soils. And compost is one of the inside that are naturally occurring in our food and stuff that ends up growing on that food waste. Breaks it all down, they create all that heat, that's where the heat comes from. They're working really hard, they're putting off gases while they're breaking stuff down. And so compost in and of itself is a living, not necessarily like a soil, we call it soil amendment, right? Like compost is meant to be added to existing topsoil for growing. You shouldn't really be growing like straight into compost because it doesn't have some of the other components of a healthy soil medium. Like you still need some of that silt and clay and loam, like those are the three makeups of a soil. And compost is just one of those things that can be added into it to increase the organic matter as well as increase some of that bacteria and living soil in there. The organic matter is like one of the things that could be one of the bigger impacts we have in Southwest Colorado. The average soils around here are like 1% organic matter. Very, very little organic matter. That's why like, you go out to Dove Creek or in the, these areas that are just kind of like red and clayey, and they require lots of intensive chemicals for large-scale industrial or large-scale agriculture because there's just nothing to really hold stuff in there. They need to like spray it on, and then it'll be good for a year, and then they're going to have to do it all over next year. But by adding a compost into it, like certain amounts, there's a study recently done by University of Missouri that was showing like certain layers of amounts of compost, like 1/8 of an inch or 1/2 of an inch or a whole inch over entire acres. Both gives large amounts of nitrogen available for uptake, as well as increasing the water retention. So increasing 1% organic matter, I think we're saying is like 50% water reduction, up to 50%. So around here, right, like drought tolerant soils, drought tolerant plants, if we could increase our organic matter by 3% of the soil, we could potentially cut down our water usage by like 80 to 90%.
Yeah.
Even for places like, just in landscaping in town, as well as larger things like turf fields and golf courses and all that stuff. So
I think
a lot of options.
when we had a conversation with Mandy the other day, she said, you said 1%
For every
per
1%.
acre is 20,000 gallons,
Yeah,
right?
it's like every 1% of soil organic matter added to an
Right.
acre of land is
Okay.
20,000 gallons of
Cool.
water.
So compost, like Chris was saying, is 30 to 40% organic matter. So
Yeah.
it's, that's a big difference
Yeah.
from the 1%. So what is compost? You've got greens and browns. One side includes grass clippings, eggshells, garden weeds, aquatic weed, farm and animal manures.
We don't take manures though.
We don't. vegetable, all the vegetable byproducts in the browns are your leaves, straw, wood chips, sawdust, dead plants, coffee and tea. And then compost, what is compost? It's the golden ratio of greens and browns. And there are certain elements that all creatures on Earth need to build the bodies of the next generation, and that's carbon, nitrogen, phosphorus, sulfur, oxygen, and hydrogen. These 6 elements are the basic ingredients of living organisms. Browns provide a lot of carbon and oxygen, and hydrogen comes easily from the air. And the greens provide nitrogen, sulfur, and phosphorus. The ratio of that golden ratio is about 28 to 1, as you guys all know, carbon and nitrogen content.
So I'm curious, so I'm a landscape contractor, I own Living Landscape Design, and so, we're trying to do more regenerative landscaping, and so we are doing our best not to take any of the landscaping waste to the landfill. We do have one guy who do you guys know Farmer Dave? He's got a booth at the farmer's market, and he's got a little nursery, and he does a ton of composting, and he sells like soil amendments. But he does it all. So we
Is he in
bring.
Bayfield or
Huh?
is he in Durango?
Yeah, it's Dave Travieso. He owns Peachtree Organics.
Oh, okay. I've tried to reach out to him before, but I've never actually heard back from him on the email.
Oh, okay. Anyway, but it's been really frustrating because some of our stuff, we can't take to him. We don't want to take it So,
Certain
are you guys
things-
gonna start taking like more?
Yard clippings and like-
Yard, yeah.
Yeah, so the main thing with that is that we don't have ways to process like brush. We don't have any chipping or mechanisms for breaking it down before we mix it in, because it needs to be somewhat broken down, smaller pieces to speed up that process. Like nothing that goes into these piles is much bigger than like this in terms of like a woody product or some straw or whatever. We are in the future planning on purchasing a grinder to manage all that brush. Right now, if that was the case, that would end up being sort of like a pay-as-you-drop sort of deal. Because right now, the arborists and fire mitigation companies that we work with, they only bring us chipped material. So they already do the process, the labor-intensive process of chipping, and then they need to either remove it from the landscape, and they can only bring it to so many places before there's nowhere else to bring it. So we take it and we manage it and turn it into compost. As of now, there's small amounts of leaves. We do leaves in the fall. Like we manage the leaf drive that they do over at the County Fairgrounds, and we take all the leaves that folks are bringing us.
Oh, cool. So we could add to that too?
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Yeah, the main thing this year is
I didn't know about that. So that's at the fairgrounds?
Yeah, they do a pumpkin drop off and a leaf drop off.
Okay, when is
Well, I
that?
didn't know
It's
that.
in November. It's after Halloween.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Usually the first week in November.
Yeah, the main thing is we just don't want leaves in plastic bags.
Yeah.
So like you can use the paper bags from Ace or Depot or whatever, but that was the first time we did it. I spent a lot of time on trash bags. And then I just have like a giant pile of trash bags for like a one-off use. So
We started using, like my crew was using tarps, and then we started using sheets. And it's way easier, and then they can tie them.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so if you guys have any used sheets that you don't want.
So the thrift store, have you ever
I know,
gone
we
there?
have gotten some at the thrift store too, but the sheets just really help.
Nice.
Reuse them and,
Oh, that's cool.
yeah.
yeah, and like a realistic, the greens and browns ratio from my perspective is a lot of just managing moisture content at first. Like being here in the Southwest, it's really dry. So I really try to make sure the compost isn't too dry. That's one of my biggest challenge. And so I start first just trying to manage for moisture, and then it's all based on smell and look, really. Like we have our inputs tested, like our major inputs, like the beer mash or the used soil medium from Greg Organics, and like our wood shavings, we got them tested just to have them tested. The food waste is like generally speaking, we kind of just know what those CN ratios are. But for me, it's the moisture. So like I want to make sure there's a high moisture content, and that's a real challenge out here. Like without adding water, we don't want it to add water to compost. And right now it's lucky that we have the wet beer mash, which is both a challenge to move, but it's also a helpful product for making moisture, for keeping high moisture content. So
But
yeah.
you don't want to add water just because of the use of water, or is
Yeah, because if we can have moisture brought in by waste products instead, we would rather do that
Than
use
water.
like well water. Yeah.
because I have to water mine to keep it
Yeah,
alive,
most-
that's okay.
Yeah. Most backyard composters, if they want to actually be composting it, they need to have water. Because you can't add enough. You don't have enough stuff. You're not eating enough. You're not making it big enough.
Yeah,
The
right.
bigger I make them, the longer they hold on to moisture.
Uh-huh.
So I just make them bigger. So now, like the average piles now they're 300 feet long and 7 feet tall. Yeah.
Exciting.
So grass clippings are not a thing yet.
Not yet, because we don't have a great way to accept them.
Yeah.
So our facility is not open to the public.
Yeah.
And we don't have a way to pick them up. It's kind of a challenge. Like people probably aren't going to want to pay to have their grass clippings picked up. In the future, there might be some way that we have like a different type of transfer station. Like we've talked about it in the past, like ideas that we could have another location that was more accessible, that was publicly accessible, and then we could stockpile and then bring stuff. But not now.
Yeah.
And we kind of talked about some of these compost benefits. The big one, I think, is the moisture component. If we can add more moisture retention to our soils here, that'll just help us do it. I mean, you're feeling it right now, right? It's like every day.
Yeah.
Like, wow, I wish we're drinking. I mean, I'm drinking like more water than I've ever drank. Can't stay hydrated enough. another big thing is the sequestration of carbon. That's one thing that we're starting to work with.
There's this company out of the northwest. They're called Climate Trust. We were talking to Mandy about that, but we're trying to get into the next 5 to 15 years. The Inflation Reduction Act that the Biden administration passed was phenomenal for just environmental infrastructure and there'll be a lot of money that go into the carbon markets. And, there's been legislation proposals for cap and trade for a long time. I think California has like a pseudo market around some stuff, but this company in the Northwest called Climate Trust, they are going to see if they're essentially they're a nonprofit and they are kind of a broker, and the price of carbon is kind of continuing to go up as climate becomes more relevant and as regulatory and enforcement mechanisms kind of take off. But they're going to help us figure out how much. We have to do this for state reporting models, so we look at the amount, and this was mentioned in the article in the paper, but the amount of methane that gets reduced, and then we turn that into an equivalent carbon dioxide per metric ton. So you put food scraps in the landfill, they create all this methane. Methane's 72 times as potent. The formula that the scientists use is this WARM EPA calculator. So we've got a couple grants from the state of Colorado, through Colorado Department of Health and Environment, and they use this calculator, or we use it in our grant reporting to look at the total amount of diverted material, and then how much methane, and then by equivalent carbon dioxide we're diverting. And some of the statistics are at 4 metric tons, average passenger size car puts out about 4 to 4.5 metric tons a year. And so it's kind of like a double whammy, the Climate Trust helps organizations that are kind of startups or being established before there's a mandate in the community. They will help get on their feet by compensating them per metric ton of carbon dioxide. Now there's like auditing and regulatory stuff, and so it's a cost benefit thing, and it really just depends on how they measure stuff. And then I guess, the methane, you can look at a carbon dioxide equivalent, and then you also have the sequestration potential of just compost that gets applied. And the Marin Carbon Project was really cool out of California. It kind of looked at doing that, like Chris was saying, like a ½ inch of compost on an open kind of area of land, and like how much carbon will that hold. And then there's some neat research being done around carbon and biochar application together to hold carbon in a stable form for like up to 600 years. So that's pretty compelling in terms of like larger mechanisms to change climate, which is kind of cool.
And yeah, again, just hammering home on the fact that we need our soils to be alive, right? If it's going to grow food, we need all these other components of it to build healthy, diverse ecosystems. Everything is alive, right? We can't see it all with our eye, but when you take it down to the microscopic level, healthy compost will have stuff like these nematodes and these amoebas as well. And Monique is certified in the soil food web programming. Yeah, and she recently did that. So we've got our microscope set up at our office on Main Street, and we'll take samples every month or so to check to see what's growing. Do we have more fungal versus more bacterial? And so right now we lean a little heavier on the fungal, and we're trying to bring that bacterial. We think one component of it would be the moisture. If we can keep our moisture content higher and higher to help provide some of that quality or some of the better environment for the bacterial versus the fungal. But there'll be random times I'll go to the piles, and after it rains, they'll be like covered in mushrooms. Like mushrooms just growing all over the place. It's kind of wild.
That's so cool.
And then they just get turned in.
Yeah, well, they only last like a day or two. They
Yeah,
pop
like-
up and then they die.
Are they those white ones, the real thin?
Yeah, they're kind of, yeah.
Oh, yeah,
They're not like the ones that, like, there's ones that, like, they grow out of asphalt sometimes. Like the milk inky cap.
Huh.
They're not the inky cap ones. Those ones, like, self-digest themselves.
Ah,
Like,
yeah.
they're actually edible before they start self-digesting. But they don't look good once they do.
Oh, dear.
Yeah, and microbial health, right? Like, we have microbes all over our body, all in our hands, obviously, especially my hands in the compost all the time. And they're super important. I feel like we're only starting to learn more and more about them, like how important they are. The stuff we have inside of our gut, how like microbial gut health has gotten really big recently. You know, everyone knows someone who drinks kombucha now. I drink kombucha. And then there's so many other places that microbes are playing a role in our life and our food systems. And you know, I think getting your hands dirty is like an important part of building your own personal good microbial health. I was always a kid that was like, it's a 10-second rule, like eating food off the or eating food off other people's plates in the restaurant. I'll probably be fine. Nothing bad's really gonna happen. But yeah, microbes in the soil, we want to help build those and grow those through the compost as well. More things microorganisms do. They're just integral to the whole life cycle, right? It's like everything that we need from the seedling to flowering to breaking back down, that whole circle of life. You know, microorganisms are playing a role, as well as other, what is the word? I'm trying to remember the name of the stuff that breaks stuff down. Blanking right now. You can't tell, this is only the first time we've ever done a slideshow. We consider ourselves dirt farmers, so we are like an agricultural company. We grow little tiny nematodes and amoebas, and we want to work directly with farmers. So we work with a lot of local farmers. That's like really what we want to get into is helping the organic small farms around the area provide a good product for their greenhouses. So traditionally, they've had to bring stuff in from Paonia. It's like the next closest soil. They're a soil blending company, as well as like there's some in Montrose and Gunnison. But there was no one making compost readily available for the commercial farmer in this part of the state. So it's been really great getting to work with a bunch of farmers over at Mancus, as well as in the Anniston Valley. Even one Long Table Farm, that one, they're like right down the road. Morgan's been really awesome and been using our compost for a couple of years now. Been really happy with it.
And kind of just speaking of the role of ag, I think also just maybe from like a policy standpoint, we're in a purple county, and so maybe Durango's a bit more liberal, and then county's more conservative. So it's kind of cool because, well, we hope that reaching out to the agricultural community can kind of be a bridge, right? Like, we all need good quality produce, and if we kind of demystifies like this gap between compost being this woo-woo, like maybe more liberal type, perspective to really being beneficial for everybody. We all want better food, better crops, healthier gut biomes. So I think part of how part of that is really important in the process too, just how we view kind of the issues as we start to expand composting, organics, recycling. It's can we reframe it and use the quote that Mandy kind of started with? Can we see it in a different lens to where this is helpful for everyone in our community? I think it takes time.
The more compost we use, the more CO2 we can pull out of the atmosphere. And again, really helpful for folks that are growing in hoop houses, right? It's like hoop houses aren't really exposed to the natural elements of growing in the dirt because they're, the whole idea is to protect them from either the cold or the hail or whatever it is. And so, but the downside is those soils don't get the natural impact of bugs and bees and like other stuff coming in. So they do need, and they have to end up using a little bit more water there. So the more compost you can add to some of those greenhouses and hoop houses, you help build up that soil over time. And it's a long-term process, right? It takes years to build up that soil back to healthy levels of carbon and nitrogen and all the different elements that you want to have there. And again, conserving water, right? Like that's probably one of the biggest things that people are stressed about as farmers. My friend Max was farming for many years over at Mancus, and when they were like out of water by now 3 years ago, 4 years ago, pretty much put it over the edge of like not wanting to farm anymore. It's incredibly stressful being a farmer around here when there's no water. Probably not stressed out this year, but it's just like 1 year different in the past 5 years. Like the previous 4 were pretty stressful. So if they can have a way to save water, not need as much, it's gonna hopefully not have them grow gray hairs quite as quickly, stressed out quite as much.
This is kind of cool. One research project found that half an inch, this is the Marin Carbon Project out of California, half an inch of compost applied to rangeland sequestered the equivalent of 1 metric ton of carbon dioxide per hectare over 3 years. I had to look this up not too long ago. Do you guys know how big a hectare is?
It's like 2 acres.
Yeah,
It's,
like
it's
an
just over 2
and a
acres. I
quarter or
think.
something? Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks. This level of sequestration on half of California's rangeland would offset 42 million metric tons of carbon dioxide, which is equal to the annual greenhouse emissions from California's commercial and residential energy sectors. When my business partner and I were up at this Recycle Colorado event up in Denver, we were doing this, we were listening to a speech by this PhD scientist on, there's like a soil, whatever her title was, but she looked at how the sequestration potential of soil depends on moisture content in the ground. And there's areas in the United States where they're like carbon sinks, it's fertile for carbon sequestration, and others where it's not as fertile. So it was really fascinating. And then she started talking about the development of carbon markets and how that's going to really kind of change the shape of the future. So we're trying to obviously do our part locally, and we're really interested in combination of biochar and compost to see if we can work with partners like NAPI, and CDOT's great, but if we can get lots of compost out kind of locally, I think we can have a cool little pilot project in our farm estate. I think that's kind of our long-term goal with our diversion is.
And we did some small scale carbon farming tests going on that we did. I think we had maybe half a dozen of folks that signed up, and we took soil samples before they applied compost, and then we were doing it on a 2-year timeline. They were going to apply X amount of compost to their part of their yard or whatever they had in their lawn. Maybe it was like something that looked like a lawn. And then they were going to take tests later to see if there was any market difference or if we could show that there's been, there's people doing those tests, but we want to do like a small scale one here in Durango itself. So we're still a year out from the final results of that one.
So dollars and cents project drawdown, again, regenerative agriculture could provide a $1.9 trillion financial return by 2050 on an investment of $57 billion. So the numbers gotta speak for themselves. Small investment for a large yield. And I think it's figuring out, I don't know, you guys, what is everyone else's opinion on how to change it? It seems intuitive, right? It's like, well, but we're, as a company, we're still trying to figure out our economic model a little bit. So we're like, well, how much do we sell a cubic yard of compost for? Is it affordable to the farmer? We try to give our farmers like a discounted price off of what we would sell it to a backyard gardener for, because we're a business and we have to, make money in order to stay in business and hold true to the values that we believe in. But I think, it's figuring out how to reach out to agricultural folks and change that paradigm of depleted lands and make it economically compelling. And I think, we're still figuring that out. So if anyone has,
You guys, did you see the Kiss the Ground documentary? And they talked about just the percentage of profit. I mean, it was like 1,000% or something of increase of profits just for the folks who had switched to regenerative. So if you could, show those numbers, it's astounding.
Yeah.
It's astounding because then they don't have to use the inputs, and I mean, it's insane.
I think it's really hard to change something you've been doing for 25, 30 years. I mean, that's a really hard habit.
But when you show numbers like that, though,
Yeah, the numbers should speak for themselves, right? Like every farmer wants to make more money.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it should be a simple. That's it. I mean, that's one of the things. We haven't had any large scale farmers, and granted, we're not there yet. Like, we're not at the point where we're like, okay, yeah, it's like 500 yards of compost for your 500 acre farm or your ranch. We're just not at that scale yet. But that's really where we can have that bigger impact, is on those scales. And will we ever get to that scale? Hopefully one day. I mean, we have the capacity. We could be selling people like 1,000 yards at a time. But for now, like working with small local organic farmers, all the folks that you see at the farmers market, those are our main agricultural customers. And it would be great to be able to like go sell compost to one of the massive bean farms over in like Duck Creek or something like that, or folks where you see like the huge expanse of tilling you see every year. And when I'm going up there climbing Indian Creek, and wow, that's a lot of dirt. Like, it doesn't look very healthy. So yeah, every little bit.
One of the issues we've found with like, especially large scale industrial farmers trying to switch to regen is the gap in between. So I'm trying to heal the soil.
That transition.
Yeah.
Right.
The transition's really hard for them.
It's really
It takes a
hard,
couple
and
years. And,
and that's where a lot end up dropping out before they get to that part where it's really good. And so it's like we need something to help bridge that gap with subsidized basically.
Yeah, subsidy. There's subsidy out there. There's
We're
there's a farm bill.
Yeah, we're already subsidizing. We just need to shift.
Shift,
Yeah.
well, for sure. But I think, I don't know, maybe there's more research that can be done there.
even down to new workflows and breaking habits. And yeah, it's hard for them.
Yeah.
Well, I think it'd be cool. That's where, like, I don't know, we've become pretty good at writing grants, and business partner Monique is like expert at it. We've all learned a lot.
I'm making a note of it.
But I think, if you get a track record, right, folks want to see you succeed. So we kind of have this vision internally, or we have staff meetings every week and kind of discuss vision and future. And really, it would be so cool to be able to create a ton of compost and mix that compost with biochar and sequester carbon that'll stay in the land for a long period of time, and then have the federal government subsidize that gap that you're speaking to, right? Maybe they subsidize the gap, maybe they subsidize the whole process, right?
Yeah.
So like the USDA and a lot of federal programs prioritize, different socioeconomic zones. So like we're in a region, not only are we rural, we're in a region that could, with NAPI, that could be very successful at pulling in some type of federal funding. So it would be cool to do it, because then if we could get to kind of that scale, then we can like really make an impact and be like, okay, our little cool methane bubble in the four corners, we can change that. And I think that's
How
really
many
cool.
how many employees do you guys have? How many are there?
We have 6.
Oh God, you guys are small. So
Yeah.
There's only 6
I
of
mean,
you?
3 years ago there was
And that's the
2.
And then who's the guy who's always picking up the compost?
That's Jeremy, right?
6 million cube.
Wow.
we had an intern every now It was originally started by David Golden.
Yeah.
2016.
Yeah.
And is he still part of it?
No,
Oh.
he sold it to Monique in 2017.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
2018, and I partnered with Monique in 2019.
Okay.
And Chris came on board shortly after, before the pandemic.
How far out do you guys pick up your bins? Like, do you pick up in Hesperus?
We have Wildcat Canyon as a Wildcat Liquors as a drop off.
Yes.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
cool.
So that's the next phase of what we're exploring. I'm actually building a kiosk before I came here today, like welding a metal like proof thing. Yeah, it's the next step is like being more available for some of those folks that are out of town and having just more like we use bear-proof trash containers right now.
Sure.
We want to have things that are just a little sexier looking. We're also going to have one downtown
Sex
across from
harmless.
Yeah, exactly.
So people just come and dump their whole bucket into the.
It'll be a pay-as-you-go model where like you can scan a code and then where you can scan a QR code and get a code to open the lock,
Oh.
and then you can like dump a 5-gallon bucket in there, and you'll just get
Oh.
charged for the 5-gallon, like, or whatever. We don't have any numbers yet.
We were actually, Mandy did it there.
Oh, we did it?
Sorry.
Never
We're
mind.
gonna do a lesser subscription fee, right? So like it's, it's not our
Right.
normal. So it's a subscription fee still, but I think we're kind of going that direction.
We still do have drop-offs.
Probably a lot of HOAs would be interested in
Sustainable
that.
concepts, yep, at Wildcat Liquors. And that's there.
We're hoping to do one at the recycling center as well. I think that would be.
Where they do the glass and.
Yeah.
You guys used to wash out the bins, which was really nice.
Yeah, back in-
Stop doing
that's-
that.
I've tried a lot of different ways to figure that back out.
Yeah.
None of them make it ever through the winter.
You know what's
Okay.
interesting?
Nah.
My parents used to own a car dealership in Farmington, the Honda dealership. And when they first started, they would wash cars, and they had a detailer. And they got into this habit of washing cars, and people would come down and service their car. You were a customer.
Yep.
For a very long time. My brother does it
I'm
very
still driving my 2006
Yes.
Honda.
We took great care of everybody. But when we got rid of washing cars, people were like, just so bummed out. And so as a company, I mean, we want to put our customers first. We're going to grow. And, I think the service part of the business is really important. So we try to balance that. We're like, how do we give? And so sawdust was like this progression of like, well, we can't clean them all because, with 1,000 customers or whatever, just shy of, it's too much work, but we still want to kind of accommodate and make sure we still have that small company as we kind of continue to grow. That's challenging.
So it's just logistically challenging is the main problem. Like we've tried,
Right,
a lot of the other
I'm sure
places
it
that
is.
do it will swap out buckets,
Yeah.
and they have way more people on the road. Like we'd have to have three people on the road.
Yeah, no, I know. I can understand it, and hauling that water, and
Yeah.
it was nice.
It was nice.
So the other thing too is that, so we've been putting ours outside now just because it does, after a while, it can get moldy in there, and I was worried about opening it up in the house with
Mhm.
mold spores, so is there any way to?
I mean, for me, like I have, for my bucket, I'll still, if I have the ability, I mean, some people don't have the ability to get to a hose, right? And the problem is once you let it go too far, then it's hard to ever bring it back. There's some buckets I've seen out there that I'm like, this has literally never been cleaned in like 5 years. It's just like black. But if you do like a good job, like if you start with a clean slate, maybe you have to do like once a year or something, or like once every 3 months or something like that. And then just are really good about the wood shaping inside of it.
Oh,
My
we don't have wood shape.
Oh, you don't have wood shaping?
No.
No. You just put out your bag, throw out your burlap sack that says San Paulo, and we'll fill it with wood shaping.
Oh, okay, cool. And then you put that on the bottom.
Yeah, you put it on the bottom and you just toss it in every time you if you have like a smaller one
And
on
that
the kitchen
helps
counter.
with the mold?
It helps with smell, it helps with mold, it helps with cleaning it. Like if you just put that, you put like a 2-inch layer on the bottom.
Okay.
And then once you pour it out, when Jeremy comes to pick it up and dump it out, there'll be nothing on the bottom.
Yeah.
Is that-
Way easier to clean.
Is that because the buckets don't have any ventilation? Because when I compost, I never had.
The red mold.
No.
I've seen mold grow in these buckets before, for sure. Like if they, especially if they get missed or if they get like left for longer than a week,
Yeah.
and especially anything.
But they don't have
They don't have holes, no.
Okay, and mine does.
Yeah.
So,
We've just had like sometimes there's a lot of liquid in some of these buckets, and we were like,
yeah. Yeah.
And everyone does something a little differently with like where they keep their bucket or how they do it. Like I have a countertop one that and I have it out on my porch and I dump it out on my porch and I have my little like bucket of wood chips next to it.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like the same deal of doing, composting toilets. They would do the same things. And I would say it's arguably smellier. And just toss sawdust on it with shavings. Yeah, if you're out, just put out you can either put out a bucket or whatever you want to put it on. Some people will put them in a different 5-gallon bucket or, but that's where you get.
Yeah, maybe I'll get it. Yeah. How much are the buckets?
$10.
Oh, okay. So if I got
You can use your own
that
bucket,
bucket,
like,
then
your
we
own
can
bucket.
have the shavings and that.
If you go to Wheatville, she has 5-gallon buckets that you can just pick up at her back door. Oh, Kristen. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
And then
she's
like,
like-
and then when they come to pick up the compost, they
Yes.
can just leave shavings each time?
They'll leave, like she's saying, like if you don't part with it, just shoot us an email and we'll just, we'll
Give you another
give you
bag.
a burlap sack so you can keep yourself all But yeah, anytime you're out, you just put your burlap sack out and then Jeremy knows to fill it with sauce.
And then once he dumps it out, then you just pour another scoop in before you put your next load of
Yeah.
waste.
And if you clean the bucket like once and it's, and if it's too far gone, just shoot us an email.
Yeah, it's kind of hard because we're like in an HOA and it's just.
Yeah.
To just, we can't do it out front of our
Right.
house.
Totally. We've done like, we've had a scrubbing party or two at
Yeah.
the site, and it's not terrible, but most of the other companies that are doing that, they're just the haulers. They're not really worried about anything else. Like their only thing is the service component of it. Like we have kind of like variety of responsibilities, and so yeah, tried all the ways to carry water in a truck and like power it with a pressure washer, battery operated.
Yeah, no, I get it. It seems logistically.
So we're getting there. We're going a little long. So this is a bit of our, let's see, come back. So this is an example of a public-private partnership with the city, Colorado Department of Health and Environment gave us a grant to do this market study, and I think in the latter part of the presentation, we'll get into, we're almost at the end here, but we'll go over some of the survey results. This is just an example of the marketing campaign with the city. You can kind of see them kick it to the curb. Compost or reduce landfill waste. So it's cool. We're on the side of the trash trucks. It was good exposure. Those are different logos to date. These are kind of some of our logo impact numbers. Kind of just read through that. So, at full potential is if we were to divert 18,000, our new facility's capacity is 18,000 cubic yards at any one point in time. So kind of those rows actively composting. So the rows that Chris pointed out earlier, that was probably 400, 600
Total, yeah.
Total
Each row
yards
is
of
like
compost.
40 to 60 yards.
So 18,000 yards is a lot more than that. And if we can do that 3 or 4 times a year, it's a lot of compost. So the goal is to, at full potential, that's when we really start to make a dent in, getting compost out to the whole community and really sequestering a lot of carbon dioxide. So that's kind of a reflection of those numbers.
Is there any timeline associated with that? Like, are we sequestering that amount of carbon within a year, within 5 years?
If we get to, so the facility is set up if La Plata County, if the city of Durango passed a landfill organics ban, we would be a lot closer. And then,
Oh, sorry, I meant like, once the
Yeah.
compost is applied,
oh yeah,
how long it then takes for that carbon to be sequestered in the soil? It's kind of a technical question, but I was just curious because, you put all the compost on there, but it's not like
right.
the next day all the carbon is sequestered down in the soil, right? Like it takes time. And it takes plants and roots and all that, right? So I'm just kind of curious of the timeline of how fast you could sequester that amount of carbon.
That's a great question. I don't know. I think it's all like, I don't know. It's like as microclimates, it's just different.
Yeah, I'm sure it is. It's really
There's
relevant
so many
question.
factors. That's a really good question.
On the rich soil.
And then, I would have more, anyways, I don't take us too far down that rabbit hole, but then I have more questions as far as like the sequestering capability beyond that first hit,
Yeah.
So like, let's say you can get to that amount of carbon sequestered in 5 years after application of the compost, then what is the carbon holding capabilities of that soil over the next 5 to 10 years from that?
Yeah, totally. I think that's.
I mean, those are super dense questions.
No, I think those are good questions. We don't know the answer to them, but I know like a ton of research is being done in that space, and I think our vision as a company is, it's going to evolve and change, and I think kind of locally depends on the moisture in the ground, so that's a big factor, and we're in the desert Southwest. And then the stuff like with biochar, we had a conference call through a local connection with a national lab, like a DOE national lab. That was a pretty cool contact. And it was Idaho National Labs. And they're doing crazy stuff. It's like most of their focus is on nuclear stuff, but they were like doing algae research, and they mentioned, and it's kind of stuck in my brain, but they're messing around with compost and biochar, and how, to answer your question, like they said that compost and biochar combined can hold carbon in a stable form for up to 600 years. And so I think they're trying to figure that out, but as a policy tool for climate change, compost has a ton of benefits.
I think the more we make, the more we'll be able to do those long-term studies.
Okay, so market study.